Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be doing a bit of a React video, and we are going to be reacting to George Lakoff on metaphors. We have two videos queued up. First, we are going to be looking at idea framing metaphors in your brain, and then secondly, we are going to be looking at George Lakoff on how he started the work on conceptual metaphor. We are kind of looking through some of his work on metaphor for a different project. We're probably going to reread little portions of a book he wrote on metaphor in addition to Women, Fire, and Dangerous Things, which is kind of a larger piece of work of his. He is by trade a linguist, and he came up with a few really important ideas. One, he really organized, for me this was important, a various kind of set of ideas around prototypical conditions as it relates to, categorization, and this was in Women, Fire, and Dangerous Things, which I think was pretty profound and robust about how the way we think of categories in our mind is not with these sort of necessary and sufficient conditions. If it has X characteristic, then it's in XYZ thing, but instead prototypical conditions where we have an idealized version of the thing, and we will relate, we will assign belonging into a group on the basis of how close it is to the ideal, which allows for stuff like radial categories where something can be part of group and less, or can be more or less part of group, rather than a binary like kind of light switch we're either in the group or not. But anyways, his work on metaphor is largely because he believes that the way that we kind of do thinking is through association rather than sort of a process that like computers take, which is like if-then type of thinking, rather than we think through association. And one of the ways we form these associations is metaphors. And so we're going to get into it. For those of you who haven't seen my Reacts videos before, I tend to pause a lot and kind of give my thoughts on something. And so if you just wanted to watch the videos without my sort of intervention, I would suggest kind of like looking at those yourself. But we are going to start things off with idea framing metaphors and your brain, George Lakoff. And so let's get into it.
The world is thinking.
Framing is the most ordinary thing you do. You think in terms of structured scroll frames, and let me tell you just a bit about it.
Okay.
The work on this was done in the mid-1970s. 1974, frame analysis by Irving Goffman came out. 1975,
We're gonna write that
the
down.
linguistic work of Charles Fillmore. Goffman looked at institutions and studied them by actually working in them. He worked in an insane asylum and in Las Vegas as a croupier in order to study them. Very serious research. Had to go to Las Vegas. Very scholarly. Now, what he discovered was this. Every institution is structured by a frame, and it has two parts. Roles or frame elements. For example, take a hospital. You have doctors, patients, nurses, orderlies, receptionists, instruments like scalpels, places like operating rooms. Those are the frame elements.
And those are the frame elements. One particular I wanted to note is roles, which I actually think is an important aspect of identity that's super important. I mean, I'm sure he's going to get into it a little bit. But in terms of roles, often I think that whatever role you perceive yourself as occupying actually structures the way your brain perceives available options in a way that is a little bit hard to fully appreciate, because you don't control what options of actions like enter your own awareness or your attention. And I think that in a sort of sense, whatever role we are perceiving ourselves as being in, whether it's like, for example, if you're a parent, you're going to process information differently, especially if you're around your kid, so your kid will prime you to look at options in a particular way. If you view yourself as, for example, in the case of police, if they view themselves as a warrior, this might lead to a sort of antagonistic relationship with the people they're policing. This is something that's noted in the President's Report on 21st Century Policing, which was put out a few years ago, but instead a better sort of role one can perceive oneself as being as a police officer is a guardian, which would be a role in which you are, don't have as antagonistic a relationship with the people you're policing, because if you're a warrior, then you need to be fighting someone, right? And the very people you're fighting are also the people who you're supposed to be simultaneously serving. So it creates this interesting thing. Let's see what he has to say.
Then there are scenarios. What happens in this frame?
Roles
So,
plus
that
scenarios.
Surgeons operate on patients with scalpels in operating rooms, right? And lots of other things happen in the frame. So that is what a frame is. And you know the boundaries. For example, You walk into the hospital to visit a friend. You go to the reception desk. There's a doctor lying there. They hand you a scalpel, and they say, you're operating on this doctor.
What?
It doesn't fit the frame.
Right.
And you know it doesn't. Okay? That is called breaking the frame. It's outside of it. You think in terms of those frames, and they are physically realized in the neural circuitry of your brain. And one of the things...
That is very interesting that it's happening on a physical level, but I wonder what the correlates are.
That my colleague Jerry Feldman and his students at Berkeley have done is figure out the kind of neural computation needed to characterize frames. And it's actually pretty simple. There's a reason why we think in this way. Now,
okay.
The other great result about frames is Charles Fillmore's. He's a member of my linguistics department, now retired, one of the great linguists in the world. He figured out that every word in every language is defined relative to a frame. Every word.
That is kind of an interesting revelation. I'm going to probably write that guy's down, rewatch and write that guy's name down. But if every word is relative to a frame, then you're going to see our entire experience of how we conceptually sort of create scaffolding is then oriented by various frames, which is, I mean, like, this is kind of getting into the metaphor, I suppose.
Like surgeon, or scalpel, or menu for a restaurant, and so on. You understand it in terms of a structure like that.
Okay.
So this is normal. Frames are the most normal things in the world, and we'll see in a minute that they are thoroughly political. Then there's metaphor.
A lot of the books he's published are actually political books rather than linguistic books, just to note.
And I'll tell you just briefly about that, because that is also thoroughly political. Let's take a non-political example. Take more is up and less is down, right?
More is up, less is down.
Person,
strong metaphor.
Person. It's not just the language. You actually think in terms of those metaphors. You know, prices are going through the roof, not prices are going through the roof, not prices are going through the roof, down.
Yep.
Right? More is up.
This is so cool, and he talks about it a lot on his book on metaphors.
Now, why is that? Well, we learned, first of all, that this is not just true here, but in many cultures around the world. And not only that, it's many things like that. There are hundreds of such metaphors that are true around the world. And they're learned very early, and you don't know that you've learned them. How did you learn them? Well, it goes like this. Suppose you're a little kid, a baby. You watch your mother pouring formula into the bottle or water into a glass over and over every day. What's going on in your brain? Two parts of your brain are activated, one for quantity, one for verticality, and they're activated over and over and over, day after day, because the level always goes up. Or you're held as a child, and you feel affection and warmth together over and over, and that means your brain is activated in two places, one for affection and one for warmth, temperature in different parts of the brain.
The point here is they're getting associated.
What happens is when they're activated over and over, the activation starts to spread. The more they're activated, the stronger it gets. The more they spread, the stronger it gets. The more they spread, until they find the shortest path between them and form a circuit. And that circuit is the metaphor. More is up, or affection is warmth.
And so this is critical because, and he in his book he writes this also. I thought the example he was going to use is that we tend to have a sort of closed body language that is more down when we are in a bad mood, and this is kind of a defense mechanism, an evolutionary biology defense mechanism for protecting all the internal organs. And then we have an up one when the mood is a lot better, and that this is one of the things he structures it. But he also talks about, in this one, which I don't think was present in his book, the pouring of the water, which structures our metaphor. So now we have this association with up being good, or, you know, a gain, or this sort of thing. You know, you could easily just as soon have the stock market, like the direction of the arrow could just be down instead, right? But we see repeatedly with various other things, and just like almost universally throughout like humanity, is that up up tends to be associated with being good. I think there might have been a counterexample of people who were living in trees, an indigenous tribe in his book, or he discusses the indigenous tribe being able to process information more vertically than other people, so maybe that's a little bit of a tangent, but also we see the association between warmth and affection. And when we say someone is a warm person, of course, we are saying that they are an affectionate person, someone who's emotionally responsive. And so we are structuring at the very, very basic level our understanding the world through this association and metaphor, and then he builds onto what he argues he doesn't have enough time left in this video to argue it, but what he argues is that not only are we building at this very basic level, but once we have this basic building block that good is up, we build and scaffold off of these metaphors in more extended ways, and that everything is kind of built on these initial sort of metaphors that are grounded in our physical experience, like the warmth association with being, affectionate, or good being up.
These metaphors, called primary metaphors, are physical.
Yep.
They're part of your physical brain. And by the time you're 6 or 7, you have learned hundreds.
It seems like an understatement, but okay. So that's the first one. Which is, you might have been able to tell, I was getting very excited as he was talking, and I was struggling to not interject and explain his thing that he was about to explain before he explained it. So now we will see George Lakoff on how he started his work on conceptual metaphor. Let's take a little bit of a look here.
I want to tell you a little about how I started working on conceptual metaphor. This is a true story. In 1978, I was teaching an undergraduate seminar with 5 students. At the time, I was interested in what it was called an art form in America called performance art, and I was giving an undergraduate seminar in performance art and linguistics. And in there, we went through various topics, reading papers on those topics. And on the day that we were to read a paper on metaphor, it was a very cold, rainy day. We all sat around a little table. There were 5 students. And one woman in the class came in a little bit late, and it was raining, so she was all wet.
Interestingly enough, his wife, or I think now his ex-wife, has a rather long sort of essay arguing that use of the word girl infantilizes women and suggests very strongly that one should use the word woman. And so I don't think, well, first of all, I think at the college level you should be calling them a woman, but it's also striking. I imagine Lakoff is very unlikely to call a young woman or a college level woman girl, but I just wanted a little anecdote.
And she was crying. Right? And we tried not to notice that she was crying, which was difficult because she was sitting at the table right here. Right there. And, so we went on with the class, and I said, well, okay, on page so-and-so, Professor so-and-so claims the following. What do you think of this? We go look around the room. We all look at her, and she says, I can't do this today. I've got a metaphor problem with my boyfriend.
That's interesting.
And she looks around and she says, maybe you can help. Well, this was Berkeley in 1970s. We said, of course. We formed what was called a little group for group therapy. And we said, okay, tell us your problem. She said, well, on the way to class, I was walking with my boyfriend, and he said something that upset me. He said that our relationship had hit a dead-end street.
So dead-end street is the metaphor.
Dead-end street. Right? And he said, I don't really understand this very well. Maybe you can help me understand it. So we said, look,
So it can be predicated on, yeah, I'll just let him talk, but it can be predicated on like other metaphors, like love is a journey, and on a journey you're on a trail, and a dead end street ends the trail.
We said if it's hit a dead end street, you can't keep going the way you've been going. You may have to turn back. And then we realized that English had a lot of expressions in which love was seen as a kind of journey.
Yep.
So, for example, you could say of a love relationship, it's been a long, bumpy road. You could say things like, we're going in different directions.
Yep.
We're at a crossroads in the relationship. You could say the marriage is on the rocks. It's off the track. We're spinning our wheels. And even an airplane image, we may have to bail out. Take a parachute. Now, and by the way, being a linguistics professor, I dutifully wrote down all of these expressions. We made a list. And I said, gee, this is an interesting list, Is there a generalization about this list? I mean, that's the question a linguist would ask. What is the generalization here? And we looked at this list and we said, well, in every case, love is seen as a journey.
Yep.
The lovers are the travelers. Okay?
The lovers are the travelers. I don't see what else they would be, but that's probably because this is a common metaphor.
What is the love relationship? The love relationship is the vehicle. Sometimes it's a car, sometimes a boat when you're on the rocks, a train when you're off the track, a plane when you're bailing out.
The functioning of the vehicle.
But some kind of vehicle.
Is the functioning of the relationship.
So love relationship is a vehicle. Right?
In some sense, you're also journeying through time, I think is part of the metaphor often.
Write down love relationship.
In some indigenous countries, actually, or some, I think it was the ancient Greeks, they actually, instead of viewing us as traveling linearly through time, they view it as them looking back as the past, and time travels through them, which is a wild, sort of different change that's it's hard to grasp when you initially hear it, so I'll just sort of repeat it. Instead of time being like a timeline and you travel through the time, instead you're a witness and you're looking back on the past and time travels through you, so the past unfolds in front of you in terms of how they conceptually view time.
Vehicle. Okay, what about this journey? Where are you going? Well, you have common life goals, and the common life goals are the destinations that you're trying to reach in this journey. Common destinations.
Is it common? Cool.
So, common life goals, destinations.
Not one to argue with Lakoff.
And what about why do you keep hitting dead-end streets and spinning your wheels? Well, these are difficulties in a journey. So, it turns out that difficulties in the love relationship are difficulties in the journey. That is, they're impediments to travel. They're things that keep you from getting to where you want to go. So you're spinning your wheels, you go on the rocks, etc. Okay, so we write...
By the way, these are not direct metaphors, not primary metaphors, as he described in the other video, right? But the idea is we're still structuring, our kind of thinking through these metaphors.
These down, and they're completely systematic. They look like almost a mathematical mapping. Okay? And you say, gee, that's very interesting. We have this generalization that looks like a mathematical mapping about these different expressions. And the woman says, I don't care about your generalization. My boyfriend is breaking up with me. She said, he's thinking in terms of this metaphor. So I said, actually, that's interesting. How can you think in terms of a metaphor? I mean, the classical theory of metaphor doesn't talk about thinking in terms of a metaphor. How does...
And this is what we're getting at. We think analogically, and so in order to... something that's like love is just an abstraction, and we structure it through our understanding of other more immediate things, like physically traveling in a car.
How does this work? So we looked at a case. We said, okay, let's suppose you take something like, we're spinning our wheels in this relationship. What do we know about spinning the wheels? Well, there's an image. The image is that there's a car, and the wheels are turning. Is the car moving? The car is not moving. It's stuck. It's stuck in America. The term spinning your wheels applies to a case where the car is not moving. It's stuck in ice or sand or snow or something like that. The wheels digging in, and the more you turn them, the more they dig in. Okay? So in this case, what you have is the vehicle is not moving. You put a lot of energy into getting it moving. You're trying to rock the car, move it, or get the wheels going, and so on. And you feel frustrated. Okay?
That's very important.
Now, what about in a love relationship? When you say we're spinning our wheels in this relationship, it means the relationship is not going anywhere. No progress toward common life goals.
Plus the frustration.
Secondly, it means you're putting a lot of energy. You want it to go somewhere. You're putting energy into it, and you feel frustrated. That is the reasoning that you do about travel is being mapped onto the reasoning you do about love via this mathematical mapping that covers our travel vehicle is the relationship and so on.
What's interesting is I think that the spinning your wheels in some ways has more of an implication that you want to work on it and you're trying to work on it than hitting a dead end, which clearly that means you're abandoning the journey, as it were, which is the love.
So the idea here is that to understand the use of dead-end street, which means that you can't keep going the way you've been going. You have to do something else, either give up the relationship or turn and go some other direction. Okay? You have to do something else. That is the inference. There's an inference. It's said for a reason. It's said for that reason. Now, these, by the way, she did not make up with her boyfriend. But she found somebody else later on. She got a job, she got her PhD, she got married to a very nice man, and she's fine. In fact, she's a chairman of a department. I want to tell you a little about
so
how
that's it being looped. But I just wanted to kind of share this because I think that this sort of perspective on how we engage in thinking is not so common. And I also think it's the correct way in how we kind of engage in thinking. A lot of people think in terms of like analytic sort of modes of thinking where it's, using necessary and sufficient conditions. And so when we talk about love, it's like, and you try and define love through this type of thing, is like, love is when you have these things present, and you need to have these things present, but some of these things are just like kind of a hint that this thing is present, and you're thinking of it in terms of like a Venn diagram, where like if you would do XYZ behavior and like this type of thing, and maybe that's a little bit difficult to unpack, but I think that it's I think this is fundamentally the structure through which we kind of engage in and structure our thought, is these sorts of metaphors. And so what this kind of, lends itself to is, he didn't talk about this in either of these videos, which was a little bit of a disappointment, but there's a ton of other metaphors for love, for example, that you could use. Love as a journey is a common one, but so is like love as a battlefield. Love is a sort of chase, a hunt, this type of thing. And you think about, well, what are the ramifications of structuring, your conception of this thing in this way? And he talks a little bit about, structuring in terms of roles and scenarios in this first video here. But for example, if love is a journey, and you're in it together in the car, well, then your role is to both collaborate, like make progress and this type of stuff. It's collaborative effort. But if love is like a hunt, right? Or you're chasing the prize, or this sort of thing, then suddenly the meaning or the roles can change quite a bit, where ostensibly, like, you know, kind of a typical relationship, let's say, the man is chasing the woman, right? And the woman's the prize, and if it's like structured through a hunt, she's supposed to, you know, play coy or whatever, and he's supposed to hunt her. And then, you know, once you finally achieve the prize or gain the prize, then the hunt is over, right? And so, like, the if you're structuring your idea of love through this sort of metaphor, right, then you will probably, you know, it'll all just be about the passion of the chase, and then something will feel wrong afterwards. If your belief is like love is a battlefield, you know, or like some sort of passionate affair, well, I mean, it is, but like, if I remember one time, one of my exes, getting into a discussion with her where she said something that just like was very curious, and like in my mind it's like ingrained in there, which is she said, "I wish we fought more often," which to me is like this wild like thing, but like if your belief is that love is about you know, this sort of like battlefield, and it's about, you know, this sort of, this needs to happen, and there needs to be very inflated and strong emotions, or there needs to be fiery exchange of this type, then if that is lacking, you might feel that there is something, that it's not really love, that it's like the spark has died out. If your metaphor is like love is a blazing inferno or something like this, then this is going to structure, you know, your behavior, and you're going to need to see certain things, or you're going to encourage certain things, and this is going to you know, kind of inform the underlying stuff. And I really need to go back and read his Metaphors We Live By you know, Lakoff, who's right here, as well as I believe Mark Johnson. I'm not 100% sure, but they kind of have an extended analysis where I think they provide like 5 to 10 different metaphors that could be used to structure love by itself. And I think that, you know, if you're if you're thinking your way through your relationships or whatever, and you don't know what metaphors or what underlying kind of structures, as he goes to in kind of this first video, inform it, then you're not paying attention to the meta level consideration that is going to very much inform kind of what's going on. And if you want like love to be a collaborative effort where you're seeing the other person as an equal, as a partner, then your metaphor needs to be informed by that. For example, like if the woman is the prize, I was going to say girl, but Lakoff's ex-wife would be upset with me on that one. But if they're the prize, right, then there's a sort of pedestalization that's occurring, where, you know, you're chasing and this type of thing. And then if you feel that you need to be chased, otherwise you're not loved, then that's going to create a situation where you're never going to let a guy catch you, right? And so I think that, you know, kind of thinking through how we think about these things is worthwhile, and it's often the type of thing that we don't ever look at, because we're not looking at our metaphors, in a sense. We're looking through them. We think we're looking at the love itself that is structured by the metaphor, but the metaphor is like a lens or a pair of glasses that we're looking through. And unless you take off the glasses and you look at the glasses themselves, you'll always be looking through them instead of at them and examining them. And so this is why I kind of think it's important. We got a few minutes of Lakoff. We got 5 minutes on this video here and 8 minutes on this video here. Just a little bit of, if you wanted to check out the videos or look at them yourself, it's idea framing metaphors in your brain. We might look for some more on Lakoff a little bit later. And there's George Lakoff on how he started his work on conceptual metaphor. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube algorithm thing, and have a good day.